What's up, Meta Nerds? Welcome back to part 2 of the Imperial-class Star Destroyer. In part 1, we got to go inside of the Star Destroyer and do a complete breakdown of the ship. In this video, we'll look at how it changed throughout history, and end with our behind-the-scenes facts. Though it would become a symbol for the strength of the Empire, it originally dates back to the Clone Wars. Back then, this ship was known as the Imperator class. The first Imperator to ever be produced was the Executrix, and the second, the Exactor, would later become Darth Vader's first flagship. The Imperator was not the main Star Destroyer of the Republic, and it only saw limited production, as the Venators were the go-to destroyer before the Dark Times. Just as the Clone Wars were coming to an end, the production of the Imperator and Tector-class destroyers were increased, and the Venator was actually being slowed down. Then, what do you know? As the ship known as the Jedi Cruiser was getting phased out, the Jedi Purge was initiated. With the Republic's transition to the Empire, the Imperator received a name change and became known as the Imperial. Production was increased even further, and according to some sources, the Empire would produce 25,000 of these Star Destroyers, which might be propaganda, but if it was true, it would make the total cost of the Imperial Star Destroyer fleet 2.5 times the total cost of the first Death Star. But this number also includes its first variant, the Imperial II Star Destroyer. One of the few visual distinctions between these two is up by the tractor beam array above the bridge. The one has this large X shape, where the Imperial II just has this single rectangle. Some mention that the colors are different, but this is the result of some lore trying to make up for the shortcomings of the visual effects in the original trilogy, causing some ships to look blue. But in universe, it is said that the white color scheme for all the Star Destroyers was purely economical and practical, as that was the only color that could reasonably be produced in large enough quantities to paint tens of thousands of miles of metal hulls. The Imperial II had a pretty similar crew size, but it had more gunners, because even though it technically had less turbo lasers and ion cannons, it had more of them focused in arrays, and included the extremely powerful octuple barbit turbo lasers. Its other stats like speed, hyperdrive, size, and the ships and vehicles on board are the same as the Imperial I. With the rise of the rebellion, the idea started going around that if you could somehow position large gravity wells along key routes, you should be able to rip rebels right out of hyperspace. Sinar Fleet Systems proved that this could work when they made the Immobilizer 418 cruiser, but Kuat wasn't about to be outdone, and worked these enormous gravity wells into the design of their Imperial Star Destroyer. This new creation would be known as the Interdictor-class Star Destroyer. Both versions of the Imperial-class Star Destroyers were terrifying the galaxy around the time of the Battle of Yavin, and both took part in the Battle of Hoth, as well as the Battle of Endor. We have some accounts about how these were deployed, with Blue Squadron reporting that each sector of space ruled by the Empire was dedicated 24 Star Destroyers. Again, we can't tell if this was true for every sector across the galaxy, or if it was just meant to spread fear throughout both the Imperial ranks and the population at large. When Vader led the attack on Hoth, he commanded the Star Dreadnought, the Executor, but he also brought Death Squadron, a squad of Imperial Star Destroyers, but we saw that these enormous ships were still susceptible to hits from a heavy ion cannon. After the Battle of Endor, the Empire was fractured, and power was being seized by Moffs and Admirals all around the galaxy. While Super Star Destroyers were a prize that would definitely ensure power, most could not get their hands on one, but some resourceful Imperials like Grand Admiral Thrawn were able to amass a terrifying force just by commanding several Imperial-class Star Destroyers. But they weren't just used by the Imperial Remnant, as they were also incorporated into the forces of the New Republic. They were reluctant to send these, or TIE fighters, around worlds that had been traumatized by the Empire, as they didn't want to send the message that they were the same evil, just under a different name. But when appropriate, New Republic Imperial Star Destroyers flew, and one of them was even renamed the Mon Mothma. Some Imperial Star Destroyers were captured by pirates, smugglers, and forces of the rebellion. One of the most notable was named the Errant Venture, and was commanded by the smuggler named Booster Tarek, who had it painted red, and used it as a giant shadow port, basically a market for selling illegal goods. It also helped the New Republic fight off the Yuuzhan Vong, and this smuggler's den actually temporarily housed Jedi during this crisis. Well, that's it for its history, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind-the-scenes stuff. With an enormous project like this, Kuat would often subcontract out a lot of the parts for this ship, and some Imperial-class Star Destroyers had hyperdrives that were made by Corellian Engineering Corporation, and thus were noticeably faster than others. A really clever design was that the turbo laser turrets were able to elevate to make sure as many guns as possible could be firing on the target. The creation of the Imperator was complicated at first, with many different sizes being drawn, and it was originally meant to be much smaller than the Imperial class. But this was changed right before production of Episode 3. The word Imperator was a title for commanders in the Roman Republic, and later became a title used by the emperors. Which brings us to the point that some people think it's silly for the Empire to say it has an Imperial-class vehicle, as that would be a bit redundant, like the US calling something a United States-class battleship. The Imperial-class Star Destroyer was meant to be in the final scenes of Episode 3, but these were switched out for Venators for the original release of the film. There have been tons of confusion over the fact that different sources call this a destroyer, cruiser, or battleship, and the only way people have reconciled this is by saying that it does so much that it perhaps could be considered to fit into the roles of all three. And to add to the confusion, no one really agrees on the amount of weaponry on this thing. The numbers that I gave are what are most often cited, but the Incredible Cross-Sections book, which was developed with the guidance of the actual model makers, and which more accurately describes what you can see on the original model used in the films, states that it only has 3 twin-barreled heavy turbo lasers, and 1 ion cannon on each side of the command tower, 1 quad laser cannon in each side trench, 3 cannons in front of the terrace superstructure, and a bunch of smaller guns lining the inside of each trench. This, along with several tractor beams, which were located inside of the vessel. And one of the artists who helped to create the original model said that he used clip-on aluminum work lights, took off the reflectors, and used projector bulbs to give us those amazing ion engines. Well, that's it for the Imperial-class Star Destroyer. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to check out our social media, or ways that you can help support this channel, be sure to check out the description down below. If you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications. But more important than all that, remember, not everything in Star Wars has to make sense, and the Force will be with you, always.